The calm before the storm emerges empire. In the vast expanse of space, a peaceful calm had settled over the galaxy. The advanced civilizations that ruled the stars were at the peak of their power. The galaxy had lived in relative peace for centuries, with only minor skirmishes and occasional disputes. The largest and most powerful empires had long grown comfortable in their dominance, believing that their strength would keep them at the top forever. But none of them were prepared for what was about to come. The galactic leaders, confident in their superiority, viewed the Deathworlders as nothing more than primitive species scattered across distant planets. The humans, in particular, were seen as little more than an anomaly. Their homeworld, Earth, was harsh and unforgiving, a place where life had to fight for survival against predators, disease, and a relentless environment. But even though humanity had managed to survive, no one in the galaxy believed they had the potential to challenge the mighty empires that ruled over them. High above the planets, in the Grand Council chambers of the Galactic Alliance, leaders from various species sat in their luxurious chairs, discussing trivial matters. The leaders of the Centaurian Empire, the Centaur Collective, and the Valdari Dominion were present, their towering forms filling the space. Their discussions had nothing to do with the Deathworlders, as they all dismissed the idea of humanity ever being a threat. "We've long considered the humans a lost cause," said Centaurian High Chancellor Drone, his deep voice echoing in the chamber. "They have their petty wars, their feeble attempts at technology, but they are no match for the collective strength of our alliance." "You are correct, Chancellor," agreed Valdari Grand Admiral Zarek, a reptilian creature who had seen many battles. "Their planet is nothing but a testing ground for survival, not a true force in the galaxy. Their technology is far behind ours. They wouldn't last a week against our fleets." The leaders of the Centaur Collective nodded in agreement, adding their own comments of disdain. None of them believed humanity had any real chance of surviving the larger galaxy, let alone posing a threat. They all thought it was just a matter of time before the Deathworlders were either conquered or eliminated. In the heart of Earth, however, things were different. Behind closed doors, far from the eyes of the Galactic Empire, humans were preparing for something the galaxy had never seen before. The leaders of the human race were far from the ignorant, helpless species the galaxy believed them to be. They knew they were seen as weak, but they also knew that they possessed something that no other species had: determination. The humans had long ago realized the truth that no one in the galaxy seemed to understand. Life on Earth had never been easy. It had never been about peace or comfort. It had always been about survival. They had faced wars, natural disasters, and countless threats that pushed them to the brink. And each time, they had fought back. Humans had learned to adapt, innovate, and thrive in even the most impossible circumstances. Now, their time was coming. The galaxy would soon learn the true nature of Deathworlders. The very creatures they had underestimated for so long would rise up and show their true strength. In the quiet corridors of Earth's governments, secret meetings were taking place. A select group of human leaders, scientists, and military strategists were working on something powerful. They knew the galaxy's empires would soon make their move, and when they did, the humans would be ready. "We've built the technology. We've gathered the intelligence. It's time to act," whispered General Lucas Grayson, a decorated officer in Earth's military. "We can't wait for them to come to us. We must show them what we're truly capable of." He stood before a large holographic map of the galaxy, his fingers tracing the paths that would lead them to victory. There was no turning back now. The humans would not wait to be conquered. They would not cower in the face of their enemies. They were going to fight for their survival. At the same time, the galaxy's empires remained blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing. They continued with their plans, focusing on expanding their power, exploring new systems, and furthering their dominance. They thought nothing of the humans or the other Deathworlders. To them, they were insignificant. But what the empires didn't know was that humans had long since learned to survive by facing the toughest of challenges. And now, They were ready to face the galaxy itself. The first ripple of change came quietly. A small fleet of human ships moved through the uncharted regions of space, their sensors picking up the slightest disturbance. It was a routine mission, yet the crew felt something different. There was an unease in the air. Something was shifting, but they couldn't yet put their fingers on it. Back in the Galactic Alliance's chambers, the leaders continued their discussions. They never saw the storm coming. They never saw the humans' resilience and cunning. And as they talked, one thing became clear. They had no idea what was about to change the course of history. The galaxy, secure in its arrogance, would soon learn the harsh truth. The Deathworlders were no longer tame. And that fateful day was closer than anyone realized. Underestimating the threat, the galaxy's leaders continued to brush off any concerns about the Deathworlders, especially humans. After all, what could they possibly do? They were nothing more than a species barely scraping by on a planet filled with dangers. The empires of the galaxy had fought wars that spanned millennia, faced off against other powerful species, and won countless victories. Humanity, to them, was just a speck, no threat at all. Yet, unknown to the galaxy, humans had been preparing for a very different kind of battle. Behind the scenes, away from the prying eyes of the galaxy's empires, the human race had been quietly developing new technologies, forging secret alliances, and training their people for a conflict that would change everything. They weren't just preparing to survive. They were preparing to fight back. On Earth, General Lucas Grayson stood at the helm of a massive underground facility, his eyes scanning data feeds from all over the galaxy. The threat was closer than they'd anticipated. A few human colonies had already detected the movement of galactic fleets near their borders, and though the ships weren't directly attacking yet, the signs were clear. The empires were getting ready to make their move. "We need to act now," Grayson muttered to his team. "They think they can simply sweep us aside like they've done with other species. But they're wrong." He turned to one of his top engineers, Dr. Clara Matthews, who was working on a new form of communication device that could tap into the galactic network. She nodded solemnly, her fingers flying over the holographic interface. "We're almost ready. The new fleet's engines are calibrated, and the weapons systems are fully operational. If we deploy now, we can send a clear message. No one will underestimate us again," Dr. Matthews said. At the same time, in the grand chambers of the Galactic Alliance, the leaders were still dismissing the potential threat from humans. To them, humanity's advancements were trivial. A new weapon here, a clever tactic there. It was all small-scale, insignificant. Their attention was focused elsewhere. They had their sights on other, more pressing matters. Resources to be gathered, power to be seized. "We should focus on expanding our influence in the new star systems," suggested the Centaur Collective's leader, Overseer Althor, his many eyes narrowing. "We can't waste time worrying about human settlements in remote areas. They'll never be a threat to us." "That's true," agreed Valdari Grand Admiral Zarek, his voice dripping with disdain. "They're still stuck on their primitive world. Nothing more than a small irritant in our way." While the galactic leaders spoke so casually, the humans were quietly making preparations that would shock the galaxy to its core. On Earth, the first of many signals was sent, a coded message, encrypted and cloaked within the chaos of galactic traffic, a faint, hidden blip in the vast sea of data. It was meant to be a warning, though no one in the galaxy would notice. No one would see the hand that was quietly lifting from the shadows, ready to strike. Back at the human military headquarters, a special task force led by General Grayson was readying for a mission unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. This task force wasn't made up of soldiers alone, but of engineers, scientists, strategists, and even civilians with unique skills. They were humanity's secret weapon, the best and brightest, working together to create something more powerful than just brute force. "We've learned a lot from the other species," Grayson said during a private meeting. "What they don't realize is that we don't just fight for power or resources. We fight for survival. We fight for everything we've ever known. And that makes us dangerous. As Grayson spoke, across the galaxy, a quiet storm was beginning to stir. Fleet commanders on distant worlds were starting to notice strange patterns, ships that shouldn't have been there, signals that didn't match the expected traffic. Some began to question the sudden buildup near human colonies, but it was too late for those questions. The storm had already started to form. Back in the Galactic Alliance's council chambers, the leaders were still unaware. They debated resource distribution, political treaties, and border disputes with each other, laughing off any mention of the human colonies. To them, it was business as usual. And while they laughed and argued, the humans were silently gathering their forces. It wasn't long before the first major offensive was launched. A small, unassuming fleet of human ships, disguised as a transport convoy, cut through galactic space unnoticed, moving rapidly toward a strategically important star system. Their mission wasn't to engage in a battle just yet, but to send a message that would echo across the galaxy. The fleet passed unnoticed, and only when they reached the heart of the system did they reveal their true purpose. Suddenly, ships materialized from hidden locations, their hulls gleaming in the cold light of distant stars. They launched a series of attacks on key galactic installations, disabling communication networks and disrupting the peaceful operations that the Empire had taken for granted. Back on Earth, Grayson watched the live footage of the surprise attack. He knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy hadn't yet realized what they were facing, but they would. The storm had broken, and the first wave of humanity's resistance had begun. The galaxy would soon learn that Deathworlders weren't the docile, harmless species they had believed them to be. The true power of humanity was now in motion, and the galaxy had only begun to see what would follow. The fateful day. The first signs of change came quietly, barely noticeable at first. But by the time anyone in the galaxy could comprehend what was happening, it was too late. The human fleet, once underestimated and dismissed as a mere nuisance, had now begun to show its true power. The attack on the star system was just the beginning. Humanity had learned to fight not just for survival but for victory, and they were about to make sure the galaxy felt it. The Galactic Alliance, still deeply rooted in its arrogance, refused to acknowledge the growing threat. The leaders were too preoccupied with their own power struggles to see what was coming. Their eyes were fixed on the wealth of new systems to be conquered, not on the rising storm that was quickly gaining strength in the outer reaches of space. But then, everything changed on that fateful day. It started with a single, seemingly insignificant transmission. A small fleet of human ships appeared on the radar of the galactic defense systems, seemingly out of nowhere. At first, the scanners didn't even register them as a threat. The ships were just passing by, nothing out of the ordinary, they assumed. But as the fleet drew closer, things started to feel wrong. The calmness in the galaxy's systems began to fracture, and a sense of unease spread like wildfire. Inside the council chambers of the Galactic Alliance, panic began to rise as reports from the front lines flooded in. Human ships were not simply passing by. They were engaging. In the blink of an eye, the human fleet moved to intercept a convoy carrying vital resources, disabling ships with surprising ease. They had planned this attack with precision, using their knowledge of the galaxy's vulnerabilities to strike where they would do the most damage. "What is this?" shouted Chancellor Drome, watching the screens in disbelief as his fleet commanders scrambled to understand the sudden attack. How could this happen? We've been watching their movements for years, and they've done nothing but run in circles. How are they? They're not running anymore, interrupted Admiral Zarek, his voice low and grim. They're attacking. This wasn't expected. The transmissions continued to flood in, each one more alarming than the last. The humans were not just fighting. They were using tactics and technologies that no one had ever seen before. It was as if they had studied every weakness of the galactic empires and had been waiting for the right moment to strike. The attacks weren't just random acts of aggression. They were coordinated, precise, and deadly. The galaxy's military leaders were struggling to keep up, their forces overwhelmed by the unexpected ferocity of the human resistance. General Grayson watched from his command center on Earth, his face illuminated by the flickering lights of multiple screens. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. The humans were no longer the underdogs. They were taking their place among the stars, and they would not go quietly into the background. "We've proven a point," Grayson said, his voice steady and resolute. "But this is just the beginning. Let the galaxy know we're not here to play by their rules. We're here to win." In the next moments, humanity unleashed its most powerful weapon yet, their adaptability. While the galactic forces focused on their traditional weapons and fleets, humanity relied on unconventional tactics that only a species born on a death world could dream up. They sabotaged ships, disrupted communication systems, and used the very terrain of space against their enemies. The human fleet made use of stealth technology that was undetectable to most galactic sensors. One by one, the mighty fleets of the Galactic Alliance were struck down, their ships overwhelmed by the unrelenting surprise attacks. The empires, which had always ruled the galaxy with an iron fist, found themselves reeling from the very species they had once dismissed as insignificant. It was a turning point, the moment when the galaxy realized that it had misjudged Deathworlders, and that this tiny species could change the balance of power forever. But the galaxy's leadership was stubborn, refusing to believe that humanity could truly overthrow them. As the first battle ended, they quickly rallied their remaining forces, determined to crush the human rebellion before it could spread any further. The stakes were high. This was no longer just a skirmish. This was the beginning of a war that could reshape the entire galaxy. The humans, however, were ready. They weren't just defending their home. They were fighting for their very existence. For every loss they suffered, they only grew more determined. Every human that fell was a reminder of why they had to keep fighting. They understood the cost of war, but they were prepared to pay it. This was a fight for survival, and they would not back down. The galaxy, on the other hand, was left shaken. Leaders who had once sat comfortably on their thrones began to fear what they had unleashed. They had underestimated the humans. They had underestimated Deathworlders. The galaxy's complacency would soon cost them dearly, as humanity's fierce spirit and determination would prove to be a force that no one could ignore. And so, the galaxy's calm was shattered. From that moment on, the balance of power had irrevocably shifted. The fateful day had arrived, and with it, the realization that Deathworlders were no longer tame. They had awakened, and the galaxy would never be the same. Human resilience in action. The galaxy's empires were reeling, trying to regroup after the devastating surprise attacks launched by the humans. They had underestimated the Deathworlders, thinking their strength lay solely in their advanced fleets and overwhelming firepower. But humanity had a different kind of power, a power forged in the harshest environments imaginable. It was the power of resilience. As the galaxy scrambled to prepare for the next round of conflict, humanity's true strength began to shine. It wasn't just their military might that was turning the tide. It was their sheer will to survive. In the face of overwhelming odds, humans had always found a way to adapt, to evolve, and to fight back. And this time was no different. In the midst of the chaos, General Lucas Grayson stood before a large screen in his command center, eyes scanning the latest reports from the battlefield. His mind was working faster than the data could arrive, processing each piece of information and finding solutions in real time. Humanity was being tested like never before, but Grayson knew that they were just getting started. "We've made them bleed," he said, his voice steady despite the intensity of the situation. "Now let's make them understand what they're up against." The human resistance was unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered. They fought not with the expectation of easy victory, but with the understanding that every battle was a test of endurance, a fight for survival. The humans didn't have the largest fleets or the most advanced weapons, but they made up for it with their resourcefulness. They didn't just rely on brute force. They adapted, innovated, and used everything at their disposal to outsmart their enemies. Dr. Clara Matthews, the brilliant engineer behind many of humanity's new technologies, worked tirelessly alongside her team to develop more advanced weapons and tools that could help turn the tide of the war. While the galactic empires relied on their massive fleets and overwhelming firepower, the humans relied on their ingenuity. Focus on disruption. Dr. Matthews instructed her team, her voice sharp as she coordinated with scientists, engineers, and military officers. We don't need bigger ships or better guns. We need to turn their own systems against them. The galaxy's empires had grown so dependent on their advanced technology that they hadn't considered how vulnerable their systems truly were. Humanity, with its ability to think outside the box, began exploiting these weaknesses. Ships that once appeared invincible were suddenly disabled with nothing more than a well-placed virus, a system glitch, or a tactical ambush that caught the enemy off guard. It wasn't just about the machines, though. Humanity's greatest strength lay in its people, their determination, their refusal to accept defeat. In every skirmish, whether it was on the ground, in space, or behind enemy lines, humans displayed a level of tenacity that no one had expected. One such example came from Captain Elena Rodriguez, a skilled tactician and leader within the human fleet. She had led her crew through some of the toughest battles on Earth, but this was something entirely different. She was now commanding a fleet of ships against an empire much older and more powerful than anything humanity had faced before. The odds were stacked against them, yet Elena's crew remained unfazed. "We're not just fighting for survival," Captain Rodriguez said to her crew before they set out on a high-risk mission. "We're fighting to show them that they've misjudged us, that we are more than just a threat. We are the future." As her fleet moved toward a heavily fortified galactic outpost, the stakes were higher than ever. The humans knew that if they didn't strike at this moment, the galaxy's empires would push them further into a corner. But humanity had always fought with its back against the wall. It was in these moments of desperation that they truly came alive. Captain Rodriguez's fleet used unconventional tactics, launching decoys, deploying sabotage teams, and hacking enemy communications to create confusion among the galactic forces. They didn't rely on sheer firepower alone. They used speed, surprise, and their superior knowledge of the galaxy's systems to overwhelm the enemy. The Galactic Empire forces were caught off guard. The human fleet struck with lightning speed, hitting key targets before the enemy could react. It was a textbook example of human resilience and ingenuity in action. Within hours, the heavily fortified outpost had fallen, a major victory for the human resistance. But it wasn't just the military that showed resilience. Across human colonies, ordinary civilians were playing their part in the struggle. People who had once been seen as insignificant by the galaxy's empires were now stepping up in ways no one could have predicted. Engineers, farmers, teachers, and even children were contributing to the war effort, using their unique skills to aid the resistance. In one particular instance, a group of human engineers had been tasked with dismantling the galactic warship that had been damaged during the previous battles. Rather than leaving the ship to be salvaged by the enemy, they worked day and night, using scraps of broken technology and their own makeshift tools to repair and reprogram the warship. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even fully functional, but it was enough. And when the repaired warship was launched back into the fight, it became a symbol of humanity's unwavering determination. The galaxy's empires had long relied on their technological superiority to win battles, but now they were learning the hard way that the humans were no longer fighting for mere survival. They were fighting to win. As General Grayson reviewed the reports from Captain Rodriguez and the engineers who had helped turn the tide, a grim smile crossed his face. He knew the galaxy's empires hadn't yet realized the full extent of humanity's capabilities. They had thought the Deathworlders were tame, weak, and easily controlled. But with each passing day, they were coming to understand that humanity's greatest weapon was not its ships or guns, but its resilience. The battle was far from over, but humanity was no longer the underdog. They had proven themselves capable of standing toe-to-toe with the galaxy's mightiest powers, and they weren't about to back down. The storm that had begun with one simple attack was now a full-blown war, and the empires of the galaxy would never again underestimate the humans. The ultimate showdown. The galaxy was on the brink of an all-out war, and the fate of countless worlds hung in the balance. Humanity, once dismissed as insignificant by the galaxy's most powerful empires, had proven its resilience time and time again. They had fought back with cunning, determination, and an unwavering spirit. Now, the empires knew that this was no longer a small rebellion. It was a full-scale conflict, and the humans had no intention of backing down. The time had come for the ultimate showdown. In the heart of the galactic capital, the leaders of the Galactic Alliance gathered in a massive war room, their faces etched with worry and frustration. They had suffered significant losses in recent months, but they still believed they could crush the human resistance. All they needed was one decisive blow, and the rebellion would crumble. But they had underestimated humanity yet again. "Prepare the fleet," said High Chancellor Drone, his voice cold and commanding. "We'll finish this once and for all. The humans have pushed us to our limits, but now it's our turn to show them who truly rules this galaxy." The leaders had mobilized every fleet they had left, each one bristling with weapons and heavily armored ships. It would be a war of attrition, a battle where the empires would overwhelm humanity with sheer force. On Earth, General Grayson stood in front of a map of the galaxy, his eyes scanning the locations of the enemy fleets. He knew this would be the most challenging fight yet, but he also knew that humanity had already proven it could stand against overwhelming odds. The odds were still against them, but they were no longer fighting for survival. They were fighting for their place in the galaxy. "This is it," Grayson said, turning to his command staff. "This is where we end this war. The galaxy thinks we're done for, but they've made a mistake. We fight because we know what's at stake. We fight because this is our home." The battle that followed would be remembered for centuries to come. As the galactic fleets approached, humanity's forces spread out in a carefully calculated defense, drawing the enemy in. The first wave of attacks was relentless, as the empires launched wave after wave of ships. The humans fought back with everything they had, using every advantage, every trick they could muster. In the opening moments, the sheer scale of the galactic fleets was overwhelming. Hundreds of massive warships advanced toward human territory, their weapons powered up and ready to fire. It seemed impossible for humanity to stand a chance. The Empire's ships were sleek, enormous, and technologically advanced, while the human fleet was small by comparison. But what the galaxy didn't realize was that humans had something the empires could never replicate: unpredictability. It was in the chaos, the seemingly random decisions that always seemed to work in their favor. Humans didn't fight by the rules. They broke them. And that was what made them so dangerous. On the front lines, Captain Elena Rodriguez once again took charge, leading her fleet into the heart of the battle. They used every bit of knowledge they had gained over the course of the war. Human tactics were unconventional, striking when and where the enemy least expected it. They didn't rely solely on firepower. They used their environment, sabotaged enemy ships, and created distractions that threw off the galactic fleets. As the battle raged on, the human resistance made a bold move. They infiltrated the command ships of the enemy, deploying highly trained special forces teams who were skilled in hacking, sabotage, and surprise attacks. One by one, the enemy's systems began to fail. Shields flickered, weapons malfunctioned, and communication networks were cut off. The Empire's ships were now vulnerable, and the humans exploited every weakness. Back at the command center on Earth, General Grayson watched as the tide of the battle slowly turned in their favor. He knew this wasn't just about military power. It was about the human spirit. The humans had fought for centuries to survive on a harsh and unforgiving planet. They had faced extinction countless times and come out on top. This fight for the galaxy was no different. As the final moments of the battle approached, the empires realized they were losing. Their massive fleets were being torn apart, their systems hacked, and their leaders scrambling to maintain control. But it was too late. The humans had shown them what true resilience looked like. General Grayson's voice crackled through the communication network as he spoke to his forces. "We've done it. The galaxy will never see us as weak again. They will remember this day. Humanity has earned its place in the stars." The galactic fleets, once so confident in their power, now faced total defeat. One by one, their remaining ships were either destroyed or forced to retreat. The human fleet stood victorious, their determination and ingenuity having proven stronger than the galaxy's overwhelming force. But the victory was not just about winning a battle. It was about changing the very perception of humanity in the eyes of the galaxy. The empires, once so certain of their dominance, now knew that humanity was not just a small, insignificant species. They were powerful, resourceful, and capable of winning against impossible odds. As the dust settled and the last of the enemy forces retreated, General Grayson stood tall, knowing that this was just the beginning. Humanity had won the ultimate showdown, but now they would face the challenge of building a new future in the galaxy, a future where they would never again be underestimated. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Deathworlders were no longer tame. They were a force to be reckoned with, and the galaxy would never forget that fateful day when humanity proved its strength. A new era begins. The dust of the battlefield had barely settled, but the echoes of the war could already be heard across the galaxy. The victory was monumental. Humanity had not only survived the onslaught of the galaxy's greatest powers, but had triumphed, proving once and for all that Deathworlders were a force to be reckoned with. The Galactic Alliance, which had once been so sure of its supremacy, now found itself faced with a choice: acknowledge humanity's place among the stars, or risk further conflict. General Lucas Grayson stood before a vast display, the holographic map of the galaxy now showing more human-controlled territories than ever before. The war had been brutal, but it had also forged a new path for the human race, one that no longer involved hiding in the shadows of the galaxy. "We've won the battle," Grayson said quietly to his team. "But this is just the beginning. We need to rebuild, form alliances, and show the galaxy that our victory was no fluke. We are here to stay." The war had left its scars, both on the people and the galaxy. Entire fleets were destroyed, and countless lives were lost, but humanity had stood tall. The human colonies now had a voice that the galaxy could no longer ignore. They had earned their place at the negotiating table, and the other empires knew it. Across the galaxy, representatives from the Galactic Alliance convened, their once unshakable confidence now replaced with uncertainty. They had been forced to negotiate with the humans, their former dismissiveness now replaced by a grudging respect. At the heart of the discussions was one undeniable truth: humanity had changed the galaxy's power dynamics forever. "We must accept the reality," said Valdari Grand Admiral Zarek, his reptilian voice tinged with bitterness. "The humans have beaten us at our own game. We must establish terms with them, or risk further conflict." The diplomatic sessions were tense, the once haughty empires now humbled by the human victory. Representatives from the Centaurian Empire, the Xanthar Collective, and the Valdari Dominion gathered, each with their own proposals. But humanity had one demand that could not be ignored. "We won't be treated as second-class citizens," said Grayson during one of the sessions, his eyes hard with resolve. "Our place in this galaxy is earned. We demand the respect we deserve. No more underestimating us." The negotiations were long and difficult, but humanity had something the galaxy's empires did not: unity. Earth had come together in the face of destruction, and now the colonies that had once been scattered and isolated worked as one. Human leadership, though diverse, was resolute, and this strength became evident in every diplomatic discussion. At the end of the negotiations, the galaxy had no choice but to agree to humanity's terms. The human colonies were granted full autonomy within the Galactic Alliance. Humanity's military presence was now seen as a necessary power in the galaxy, and no longer were they seen as the weak, isolated species they once were. But the victory wasn't just political. It was cultural. The galaxy had learned that underestimating Deathworlders was a grave mistake. They had learned the value of resilience, of fighting for survival against impossible odds. The empires could no longer afford to ignore the lessons humanity had taught them. Back on Earth, life began to return to normal, but the shadow of the war still loomed large. People were rebuilding cities, reconnecting with family, and looking to the stars with a sense of cautious optimism. They had proved themselves, but they knew the galaxy was vast, and their victory, though hard-earned, was just one battle in the larger conflict for survival in a universe full of dangers. As the final peace treaty was signed, a new chapter began. The galaxy had been reshaped, its power dynamics forever altered. The empires that once ruled with an iron fist now had to coexist with the species they had once dismissed. Humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer uncertain. It was secured. General Grayson, standing on the balcony of the newly rebuilt human capital, gazed out at the stars. His mind drifted to the future, where humanity would face new challenges, new threats, and perhaps even new alliances. But for the first time, there was hope. Humanity had shown the galaxy that it was not to be underestimated. They had earned their survival, and they would continue to fight for it, no matter the cost. "We've done it," Grayson said, his voice low but filled with conviction. "The galaxy will never see us as weak again. We've proven ourselves, and now we lead." A new era had begun, one where humanity was no longer just a species struggling to survive on a dangerous planet. They were a power in their own right, respected and feared across the stars. And as they looked to the future, the galaxy knew one thing for sure: never again would they underestimate Deathworlders. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and humanity had set the stage for a new age of exploration, diplomacy, and resilience. The galaxy would never be the same again, and neither would humanity.